Welcome everyone to this month's college planning webinar, in which we are going to be discussing the SAT and the SAT subject test. But first, I just want to go over a few key things that you may want to be keeping in mind, and then I'll be introducing the presenter. I'm going to be recording this webinar and we'll be covering a lot of material. So as I previously mentioned, definitely make sure that you grab a pen and paper handy so that you can take some notes. Also, as I mentioned, we're live streaming this presentation on Facebook and also YouTube. So if you're watching this, please give us a like or a share it with your friends as well. And finally, for those of you that are using Zoom, I invite you to submit your questions at any time during the webinar using the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. Now, at this time, I would like to introduce today's speaker. Mary Jo has worked in college readiness for 14 years. 12 of those years have been spent working at More Than a Teacher here in Austin, Texas, advising students and parents on how to prepare for the SAT and ACT. Mary Jo is passionate about helping each student achieve their personal best scores and showing families how to maximize those scores for admissions and scholarship opportunities. And at this time, I would like to go ahead and hand over the controls to Mary Jo. Mary Jo, good luck.
Thank you so much, Dale. Thanks so much, guys, for coming tonight. We've got a lot of information to cover and not a lot of time to cover it. I want to be sensitive to everyone's times and everyone's time zones. So we're going to get started talking about the SAT first, and we'll go over the structure and format of the test. I'm going to let you know 3 common mistakes that I see a lot of families make when it comes to preparing for these tests. We'll talk about how to get signed up for the test and what good timing is. And then we're going to finish up talking about the subject test and with some questions. So like I said, a lot of information to cover, not a lot of time to do it. So let's jump right in. So the structure and format of the SAT is on a 1600 point scale. So a perfect score would be a 1600. That's half from EBRW. That stands for evidence-based reading and writing. And then half from math. It's a 3-hour test plus a 50-minute optional essay. I'll talk more about that in a little bit here. So there are 4 sections of the test. There's a reading test that's 65 minutes long, 52 questions total. A writing and language test. Now, when you hear writing and language, don't think that you have to write an essay for this part. The writing and language test is all grammar skills. And for most students, that's kind of the low-hanging fruit. So when I'm working with a student and I want to give them some easy things to tackle to bring up their score quick, I jump right to that writing and language section. So that's kind of a good tip for a lot of you out there. That section's only 35 minutes long, but it's half of your verbal score. There's 44 questions. Then the math test has 2 sections. One is no calculator. That one's only 25 minutes. And the other is with calculator, and it's 55 minutes. When I poll students and I ask them which of those 2 sections harder, they're both hard. They're both pretty tricky. So any of the sections on the SAT are pretty word heavy. And so even on that math test, you have to do a lot of reading, and the timing can get a lot of students. Something to keep in mind for the math section is that all of the questions go from easy to hard. So you want to make sure you're getting all of the easy questions at the beginning and saving yourself some time so that you have that time for the hard questions at the end. And when you're looking at your student score report, if you're looking at that math section and you see a lot of reds or a lot of X's there towards the end, that's totally okay. That's really normal. And sometimes I have to reassure students with that. They're like, I missed so many questions here at the end. I'm like, yeah, you ran out of time, and those were all the hard questions. For the whole test, keep in mind there is no penalty for wrong answer choices. So you want to answer every single question. If you don't know it, guess and move on. Okay, so now I'm going to jump into those common mistakes that I see. And the first one that I see has to do with goal setting, and it's not setting specific goals. Probably the #1 question I get from students and parents is, what's a good score? Or do I have a good score? And the answer to that question is really awful. It's that it depends answer. What's a good score is kind of like what's a lot of money. Depends on what you want to do with it. A lot of money to buy you a really nice dinner is not enough money to buy you a house. So a really good score to get you into Texas Tech or a school like that here in Texas may not be a good enough score to get you into a school like Rice or a school like Harvard. So to set a really good expectation and to get a good target score, you need to start having an idea of where you want to go to school. Look at a baseline score, and that can come from a PSAT or a practice SAT, to set a good expectation. So when you check the college websites for the score requirements, if you see that you need a 1360 to get into Texas A&M, and you know you've got a 1,300, is a 60-point jump reasonable? Absolutely. Absolutely. We guarantee 100 points with our class. So 60 points is totally doable with work. But if you see you need a 1,360 and you look at your baseline score and you've got a 1,030, is that 1,360 doable? That's a big jump. You know, I would say that A&M might be a reach for you. It's probably not, it's definitely not a safety. It's probably not a target. Even with some work, I think 100 to 200 points is very doable for a student who's willing to dig deep. Any more than that, I've seen it happen, but it's really hard to guarantee that without, you know, knowing the kind of work a student's going to be putting in and them having a really perfect test day too. So also, we want you to be taking practice tests to make sure you're on track with hitting that target goal. It shouldn't be a moving target. When I talk to a student and I say, what's your goal after you complete your class, or what's your goal after you complete this tutoring? And they say, I want to do good. I want to do better than I did last time. I'm like, what does that mean? Be more specific. So when I have a student come in and I say, okay, you're taking the SAT next weekend, what's going to happen? And they're like, well, I'm really hoping to get a 1420 this time. I got a 1440 on my last practice test, so I think that's doable. It's not about what that number is. It's about not making it a moving target. And it's about making it something that you know what you're shooting for and being very specific where you can. Another common mistake I see students make is testing cold. And this is old advice. I know this was the advice back in my day when I took the SAT, was just take it cold one time and see how you do. And then you can always take it again later. And that is true. You can take the SAT as many times as you want, but testing cold is a mistake. You're going to pay for every official test. Many colleges are asking you to share your scores every time you test. So I think you should prepare before every official test. If you want to just test cold, take a practice test, right? You can do that for free. You can do that from home. But if you're taking an official SAT, go ahead and plan to spend at least 20 hours studying to get ready. Now, where did I get that number from? What's that 20 hours about? College Board did a really cool study using Khan Academy to see how many hours of prep it takes to move a score by an average of 115 points. And what they found was students who spent at least 20 hours getting ready improved their score by an average of 115 points. What that means is students who didn't spend those 20 hours, if they say, well, I logged into Khan Academy or I looked at this book, but I only looked at it for, an hour or maybe 2 hours total, that's not going to move your score. So you need to set aside at least 20 hours. The other thing they found in the study was that the most popular day for students to log in and use Khan Academy, guess when? The night before the test. Big mistake. Big mistake. So I know some students out there might be thinking, when you said 20 hours the day before the test, could still make that work. Don't do it. You can't cram for a test like this. So you want to spend 20 hours and you want to space it out. Our classes usually start about a month or a month and a half from an official test date to give you plenty of time to break that up. I mentioned our classes, but really each student needs to figure out what style of test prep is going to work best for them. Independent practice is not a bad way to go. Khan Academy, I mentioned earlier, is a free tool that you can use. Khan Academy is partnered with the College Board, so it's authentic practice materials. We recommend it to all of our students in addition to what they're doing in class with us. What I like about Khan Academy is you can work on specific skills. For example, if you're missing a lot of math questions having to do with linear equations, you can go onto Khan Academy and practice just that skill. So that's pretty cool. What I don't like about Khan Academy is that it's all independent. It's all self-motivated. So if you're the kind of person that you're like, I wanted to learn to play guitar, so I watched some YouTube videos and I got a book and I put a chord chart poster on my room and now I play guitar, then Khan Academy could be great for you. But if you're like me and you're like, I wanted to learn to play guitar, so I downloaded an app, I started watching a YouTube video, but I got distracted. If you need a motivator, you need a coach, then you might want to think about studying in a group or taking a class or doing some private tutoring. And I can answer more questions about that down the road. But what I want you to think about is just doing nothing is a plan. It's just not a very good plan. So make sure you're preparing before every official test and doing something because you will get something out of it. The other common mistake, this is something I hear all the time, I hear it from parents and I hear it from students, is they think the reason their student can't do well on the SAT is because they're just anxious. I'm just an anxious tester. So here's the thing about that is if you're thinking, yeah, that's me, or yeah, that's my student, you're in good company. Almost all of us get nervous when we take tests like this. It's really important Your nerves are going to be high on test day. So some things that you can do, one, we already talked about preparing, right? So you're going in confident, you know what to expect. There shouldn't be any surprises. Then focus on the things that you can control: your sleep, your nutrition, materials that you need for test day, having layers with you, bringing a bottle of water, having your graphing calculator and knowing that it's one that's approved for the test. All of those things are in your control. Another thing I encourage students to do is to use their breaks wisely. You do get a break in the middle of the test. Sometimes when I'm proctoring a test, I see students during that break, they're so eager to get up and move around. That's fine. You know, make sure you do use the bathroom, but also put your head down and close your eyes for a minute if you need to. Take some deep breaths. You know, think about those sections that are coming up. Make sure you're smart about those breaks. And the other thing is, don't cram. And this is true for everybody. I already mentioned it, but especially if you're a student who struggles with testing anxiety, don't cram the night before. What's going to happen is you're going to see some skills you're not good at. You're not going to have time to get better. So those are the 3 mistakes that I kind of see a lot of students make, and I hear a lot of parents saying these things. Okay, so what about timing? When should you take the test? This is important too. The SAT is offered 7 times during the school year. You can see all of those dates listed here on this slide. Most students test, the average is 2.5 times. Obviously, you can't take half of an SAT, so that means 2 or 3 times is very normal. I encourage you to work smart, not hard. Hopefully, you can take it twice and be done with it. If you need to take it a 3rd time, that's okay. After 3, there can be a point of diminishing returns. And I've seen students over-test, and their score at first is getting better, and then it starts flatlining and then maybe even dropping because of test fatigue. So that's why I say prepare before each test, take it seriously, and get it over and done with. Get it over and done with junior year if you can. You want to think about your extracurricular activities and pay attention to those deadlines too. Your extracurricular activities, I had a student one time, she was a competitive dancer. When we looked at all of the test dates, she was not available for any SAT dates because she had performances on all of those weekends. So we were like, okay, ACT is going to be the test for you, just, you know, by default. So you want to keep in mind your extracurricular activities, family calendar, and things like that. The March 14th test date is the most popular date for juniors. Double check when your spring break is. We had some students a few years ago who were gone during their SAT. They were going to Hawaii on a band trip, which is super cool. I would love to go to Hawaii on a band trip. They did a class with us leading right up to that. And then they took their SAT in Hawaii. Is that a good idea? Absolutely not. I don't think you're going to get your best results. So you want to take it on your home campus if you can. If you're a homeschool student, or if your campus isn't offering it on the date that you want, look at a campus that's close to home and a place where you feel comfortable. You'll get a better score. The other thing I ask families when they're trying to figure out their testing timeline is, have you already completed Algebra 2? The test is very algebra heavy, especially Algebra 2. Those concepts are foundational, not only for the SAT, but for the math that you're going to see in college. So if you've already taken Algebra 2 as a sophomore, or even earlier, some of you, you're ready. You're not going to learn more math necessarily that's going to be on the test. So if you've already completed Algebra 2, go ahead and get started. It's okay to test in the fall of your junior year. Perfectly fine. If you're in Algebra 2 as a junior, that's okay too. You're not behind, but I would wait and let you get a little bit more of that math under your belt before you take the SAT. So if you're currently enrolled in Algebra 2, I would look at probably December or March as your first SAT. And the idea is you take it at least twice junior year, and then you have some time to retest senior year or summer before senior year if you need to. Okay, we're going to move away from the SAT. Hopefully you have some questions, and we'll check back in on those here in just a minute. I'm going to say a couple things about the subject test, though, before we finish up. So the SAT subject test, I'm starting to see them fade a little bit. They're not quite as popular as they once were. The way we see it is the subject test really serve 2 purposes. One is they're still required for certain colleges or specific programs. We're here in Texas, so I hear a lot of things about Texas schools. I know that for A&M, you don't need subject tests to get into A&M, but you do need them to get into the School of Engineering. Rice requires subject tests if you're submitting an SAT score, but they don't if you're submitting an ACT score. So, but those policies can change from year to year and definitely are different from campus to campus. So you always want to double check with the college to see what subject tests you need. The other purpose I think subject tests serve is showing off a specific or special ability that you have. Did your family live in France growing up and you actually speak really beautiful, fluent French? Maybe you want to show that off. How do you show that off in a way that's legitimate? Take that French subject test, right? It's going to show that skill off. Are you really, really great at physics and you love it and you want to do something with that in the future? The school you're applying to doesn't require a subject test, but you loved AP physics and you just kind of want to show off that skill. Take the subject test. It's a good way to show off a special ability and it can make your college application look really, really good if you're doing really great at it. So the subject tests are kind of an elite thing at this point. They're scaled on a scale of 200 to 800. So 800 is a perfect score. We don't recommend submitting subject tests unless they're 700 or higher. So we want to see you getting a really, really strong score before you're going to send that to any schools. You can do sample problems on the College Board site. They have some sample questions there. They also have a book that has practice tests for all of the subject tests. We have that at our office, and I recommend it when students are trying to decide which one they should take. Another way to prepare, though, for those subject tests is to take challenging courses. Do you know who owns a subject test? It's College Board. You know who owns Advanced Programming, or AP? Also the College Board. So the College Board owns both. So AP tests do look a lot like the subject tests. Not identical, but very similar. And the timing that works for many students is to take a subject test after that AP class concludes. I mentioned physics earlier. So if you're loving physics, you're in it and it's so fun, and you think you're going to get a great AP test score, go ahead and do that physics subject test right around the time that class is wrapping up. Hopefully you can get a great score there. They're shorter than the SAT. They're only an hour long. You can do up to three subject tests in one day. I don't recommend more than 2, though. You can do 3, but I recommend 2 or even 1 just to keep your focus and not get too burnt out. There's 20 different subjects, though, to choose from. So you really want to make sure it's one that's going to highlight your strengths and show off who you are on your college applications. Okay, that's all I've got kind of in a nutshell. I could go on and on about this stuff for days and days, but we've got just a little bit of time left. If anyone has any questions, I am happy to take those.
Great. Thanks so much. Yes, and I do have a handful of questions in. And for the folks that are watching on Facebook Live, I apologize for kind of getting a late start on this. For some reason, I was having some technical errors at the very beginning. So the first part of the segment, like the first few minutes, is a little cut off. But again, I do apologize for that. Michelle is asking, and I'm going to let you I'll let you answer this, Mary Jo. Really, when it comes to the test, and I know this is kind of all relative, but what is harder, AP or the subject test, and how do you prepare specifically for the subject test?
I would put them at about the same difficulty level. I would say the difficulty with subject tests is just that students aren't as familiar with it. AP tests, a lot of times they've seen those sample problems throughout the year. So what I think you could do to prepare for the subject test really well is get a copy of a full practice test for the subject test you want to take and kind of work that into your curriculum throughout the school year. Is
Right.
one way that you could do that. In terms of preparing, people ask all the time if we do a class for things like the subject tests, and it's not strategy. It's not test taking strategies like you need for the SAT. It's content. So it should be content your student already excels at. And then what you want to do is fine tune and make sure it's going to be a really awesome score. Private tutoring can be a good way to do that if you need it.
Good. And Scott, I can go ahead and answer this one. Yes, for those of you that are chiming in from North Carolina, Duke does require a subject test unless you're taking the ACT writing. I do, one thing that I want those that are paying attention, I do want them to understand that, especially for those that are college bound and looking at going to the highly selective schools, it's really important that you do your research in advance, that you understand not only, the requirements for GPA and standardized tests, but you also look at what is going to be required if there's any other additional tests that are required, like the subject test, so that, as Mary Jo mentioned earlier, you can really combine preparation for that AP test with the subject test also at the same time. You don't want to end up having to go back and take a subject test on something you haven't had in 1 or 2 years. Um,
Absolutely.
and something that I recommend as a consultant, anytime I have a student that's taking an AP test, my freshman, my sophomore, um, you know, if you're in an AP course and I know that you're college bound, a lot of times I encourage you to go ahead and take a subject test at the end of that year so that by the time you become a senior, you've already got maybe 2 or 3 subject tests under your belt. How has that been kind of your experience also, Mary Jo?
Absolutely, absolutely. I've had students that by the time they get to senior year, they're not taking any subject tests at all because they got them out of the way freshman and sophomore year. They
That's
may not even need to take them as a junior if you are working smart. The other thing about the subject tests, if you're looking at those requirements and a college says something is recommended or highly recommended, what should you do?
yep.
Do it, right? Always do the recommended thing. And what I see for many schools, I don't know if you're seeing this too, Dale, is that even if they don't require the subject test, they do recommend them. And if they recommend it, go ahead and do it.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. 100%. I mean, keep in mind if there is something on that college application, and this is a whole nother webinar, but if it's something that says that it's recommended and you're not doing it, well, you better believe there's someone out there that is competing for that spot and they are going to go the extra mile. We just had another question come in, Mary Jo. Jose is asking, how many times do you recommend a sophomore take the SAT?
So, I mean, I usually don't recommend testing before junior year, maybe the summer going into junior year, but I usually don't recommend the SAT for a sophomore unless you have a sophomore who's maybe hoping to graduate early or they were on a very, very advanced math track and it's been a while since they've seen that Algebra 2. I had a student who took Algebra 2 in 8th grade. And I did encourage him to go ahead and take an SAT earlier. And he took it as a sophomore. Your scores are good for 7 years, so you can test earlier. I usually see those students' highest scores from their junior year, partially because of that Algebra 2 component and because of the rest of their course load. Many students also take the PSAT sophomore and junior year. And so that's a good chance to get a feel for the test and take that practice test. That's going to be offered in October. It's mid-October in most places.
Yeah, I agree with you. We work with a lot of high school students all 4 years, and I like to get. And I think you mentioned a little bit about this earlier. I like to have a practice SAT and a practice ACT, the PSAT, PACT. I get a benchmark done probably that freshman year. I look at both of those scores, and I do the same thing like the junior or sophomore year. I look at those scores. I look at the curriculum, look and see what kind of content's going to be on these tests. And just as you mentioned, I mean, the school may have already covered all the content that's going to be on some of these standardized tests, especially if you are a high performer. So I want the families to understand that this is not a one size fits all approach. You do not have to wait until your student is spring of their junior year to take these standardized tests. In fact, I've seen I've seen that strategy apply, and that can actually hinder a student from doing well. The ACT goes up to being a 36. I had a sophomore earlier this year that tested a 34 because they were ready. And so it would not have been a wise strategy to have them wait to take the ACT their junior year because they would have forgot a lot of the content that was on it. And also keeping in mind that sophomore had already done some practice tests. We had already been able to predict which of the tests they were stronger on. It was definitely going to be the ACT. And we did test prep for about 1 month before they went in and took the test. And now they can forget about it because they are able to focus on their grades and their classes. Another question for you, Mary Jo, is we're getting families, well, Carrie's asking, when do I need to take the writing section of these tests?
Oh, I'm so glad that you asked about that one because I meant to give a little bit more info there. So that's one of those things like we were talking about earlier that, may not be required everywhere, but is it still good to have? What's the deal with that optional writing section? So the optional essay, it's given at the end of the test. It does not hurt your multiple choice score or help your multiple choice score. It's seen almost as an entirely separate score. Not every college requires it. But we tell students, if you're applying to 6 colleges or 8 colleges and only one of them requires it, you're going to have to go back and take the entire test over again just to get that essay, just to get the optional essay piece. So we say go ahead and sign up, and definitely your first time taking the test, especially if you know the colleges you're applying to want to see that, go ahead and take the essay. It's not going to pull down your multiple choice, and it could help you out, and it'll keep you from having to go back and do it later. The reason for that debate is every college cares how you write. There's not a college out there that doesn't care how you write, but different colleges see how you write a different way. Most colleges say, okay, I'm going to read your college admission essays, and that gives me an idea of how you write. I'm going to see if there's a lot of errors there. I'm going to see how you tell a story. I tend to agree with those colleges. Then there's other schools that say, I've got this great college admission essay here, but how do I know you wrote it? Maybe you paid somebody to write it for you. Maybe you downloaded it from online. I want to see something you wrote in a controlled setting. Those are the schools that require that optional essay piece. So we say when you hear something's optional, go ahead and do it. When it comes to that essay, I think you should sign up to take it, especially if you know that a few of the schools you're looking at do require it.
Well,
Would you agree with that?
absolutely, 100%. In fact, I recommend my clients take the writing every opportunity they can, and here's why. If you're applying to a school in California, especially the UC system, UCLA, Berkeley, these schools actually require the writing to be done on your test. So you don't automatically want to find out by default you don't have the requirements to apply to a school like UCLA or UC Santa Barbara because you didn't take that writing section. So go ahead and take that, absolutely. Another question this is coming in from Erica. My son struggles with test anxiety. Do you have any advice for how to really calm them down?
Yeah, I think it's kind of the if you're afraid of, if you got a fear of heights, you should go skydiving or something. I don't think it's quite that extreme. But I think the mistake students make is they're like, these tests make me really anxious, so I'm going to stay away from them. You kind of need more exposure. So I think doing some prep work, either doing a class or some work with a tutor, will take some of the mystery away from the test. That's going to calm a student's nerves. And then paying attention to all those other things that you know. When it comes to test day, the same things we've been hearing, since you did standardized testing and the Iowa test for some of you, or SOLs, or whatever they were, depending on where you might have grown up. Getting a good night's sleep, eating a nutritious breakfast, taking some deep breaths and calming yourself down during the testing experience, all of those things are going to make a difference. Another thing I remind students of right before they go in and take their test sometimes is this isn't your only time to take it. Put your best foot forward, but don't put so much pressure on this one day. You can take the SAT as many times as you need to. And I think some students who struggle so much with testing anxiety, one of the reasons is because they feel like this is it. It all comes down to this moment. And that's not really true. It's only part of your college application. It's just that first part to open the door to get into college, but it's not the end all be all. So I think that's what I've seen help out a lot of students.
Yep, exactly. And then one of the last questions I want to ask is, and actually Vijal is asking this, how many SAT subject tests are required by schools like Duke and Harvard? I want everyone to understand that, college admissions officers, we look at all 4 years that a student is in high school. And it's important to start really kind of thinking of your game plan your freshman and your sophomore year. And if you are wanting to apply to a school like Harvard or Duke or anything that has, especially those that have like the 95% rejection rates, go to their website, look at the requirements now. You definitely don't want to be looking up requirements to apply to a Duke or a Harvard, your junior year, and only to realize, gosh, you forgot to do a lot of things your freshman year, your sophomore year. If you are college bound at all, you really do want to start sooner than later because the clock is ticking and all is fair in the high stakes game of college admissions. So again, my advice to you is start thinking about the schools that you want to go to. Go to the admissions website, look at the requirements, and start creating some type of timeline your freshman, your sophomore, and your junior year so that you're not by default ruled out from applying to any college of your dreams your senior year because you don't have the requirements. Mary Jo, this has been a really good webinar. Do you just want to quickly, because I just got this message too, do you maybe just want to give maybe a couple of quick tips or a little bit of advice on what the difference is between the ACT and the SAT and maybe which one is better?
That's so tough. I feel like we could have a whole nother webinar to talk about just that. So maybe we'll set that up in the future and you guys will hear about it. I will say there's a lot of kind of myths and legends out there about which one a student should take. For every single thing I've heard, I've seen exceptions to it. So one isn't the easier test, one isn't the math test. Not really true. The best thing to do if you're trying to decide which one you want to take, do a practice test of both. There's a conversion chart that we use that's been released, and College Board and ACT actually collaborated on it. So you can compare your two scores apples to apples and see which one's the stronger test for you. I will say they're more alike than they are different. They're testing a lot of the same skills. They're just slightly different style. SAT is a little bit more depth. There's a little bit more tricky questions. It's a little bit more wordy. ACT is a little bit more straightforward. Those are generalizations. Like I said, I could talk about this for at least 30 minutes, but that can kind of get you started. If you start with those practice tests, then you can make a database decision on which one you should take.
Exactly. Good point. Yep, exactly. Starting with practice tests now, understanding where you're strongest at. And again, one thing I want to make sure that you all understand is that colleges are going to accept both. They don't really care whether or not you took the ACT or the SAT. They don't really have a preference. The most important thing is that you at least make sure that you're taking the test that is required. You're getting in the writing section if that's something that's going to be required. You're getting in the subject test. You're pairing the subject test with the AP course that you're taking that year, and you're taking all of the requirements necessary. So great advice. And for all of you guys tuning in, especially those that are in Central Texas, you can learn more about More Than a Teacher because we'll be working with them this fall at Austin's College Bound Boot Camp on Saturday, October the 19th. It's going to be at the Austin Public Library, the Central Branch. So you can definitely catch them there. That's on Saturday, October the 19th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. And we are also collaborating with them at the Dripping Springs College Bound Boot Camp as well this fall. So lots of really great, exciting things happening. I do want to thank you, Mary Jo, so much for presenting. I do have a feeling that I'm going to be pulling you back to do an ACT webinar because we're getting lots of questions, but unfortunately we are out of time. So we won't be able to get any more questions, but I'm sure, you can reach out to More Than a Teacher via email or phone call. And real quick, if folks are interested in learning more about you and your test prep and your services, you all do provide practice tests. I
We
believe
do. We offer practice tests almost every weekend. We also offer a lot of services on campuses in the Austin area. We do private tutoring, and we can do private tutoring via Skype. So even if you're not in the Austin area, you want somebody really great that can help coach you through any of this, feel free to reach out. Call our office. Our email address is there. You can visit morethan-a-teacher.com.
Awesome. Great. And today's webinar will be recorded and put on the Access College America website, www.accesscollegeamerica.org. We recently revamped our website, and it now includes quick links for college planning, newsworthy updates for today's prospective college student, parent advice articles, a Scholarship Central page featuring over 100 scholarships, plus so much more. And again, the best part is it's totally free. So definitely check out accesscollegeamerica.org. And finally, if you know anyone looking for college planning guidance, let me know. We're currently accepting freshmen, sophomores, and juniors nationwide, and services include academic planning, career exploration, SAT, ACT test planning, and college list building. So visit us at accesscollegeamerica.org to prepare, apply, and achieve. This concludes today's webinar. Thank you all, and goodbye.
Thank you.